Labour warns hotels against owing workers' salaries. Now, what is actually happening here is that the Nigerian Labour Congress has been warning so many companies all around the country, especially in the private sector, not to lay off workers, that is to sack workers, not to reduce the salaries of workers, and also not to owe workers' salaries. Now, I understand the good intentions behind all these things. It's all for the benefit of the workers, to make sure that people don't lose their means of livelihood, people don't lose their jobs. It's for the best, so that you don't have families crumbling, because when the major person earning money for the family loses his or her job, things tend to go downstream. The children may start going wayward and all of that. So many things will go downstream after that, because poverty always breeds crime. That's it. Now, that doesn't give you the right to commit crime, but that is just the fact. The atmosphere of poverty is going to breed crime. So that's how things work. So you don't want to increase that tendency. That's one of the reasons why the Labour Congress is trying to do all of these things. But we have to understand that this is not how the businesses work. Businesses don't work this way. You can try all these sort of things with the federal government. You can try it with the state government and threaten them and all of that, and make sure that they cough out the money and all of that without people actually working. But if people don't work, if the company is not being productive, if the company is not being making money, that is not being profitable, there is no way you're going to get the funds for you to be able to pay the workers. That's just the reality. Now, according to the article that this thing is based upon, the Labour Congress is talking about the fact that these hotels are just complaining. They are just trying to use this opportunity, this COVID-19 opportunity, not to pay their workers, and also sending their workers back home without paying them leave, that is compulsory leave that is not paid and all of that. First thing first, you have to understand, if you are laying off your workers or you are asking them to go back home without any leave, you have to understand that all these workers could be working for the company. The reason why they are being laid off or they are being asked to go back home is because there is no work for them to do. There is lockdown. Most of these hotels are not being allowed to even take in any form of visitors. Some hotels are being locked down. Consider what is happening by Governor Wike knocking down 2 big hotels in the state. So that's what is happening. So many of these hotels are actually under pressure. They cannot operate right now. So they can't really operate. They are really losing money. And you expect them to keep paying the salaries of those workers at home? It's just not sustainable. There's no way to do it because the money isn't somewhere. It's not like all these companies have money stocked up somewhere and they're just keeping it and hoarding the money and keeping it somewhere and making sure that the workers are suffering and all of that. Because, see, one thing that's there is that if you keep paying the salaries to the workers at the detriment of the company surviving and being able to remain profitable, what is going to happen is that the company is going to collapse completely and then the workers become absolutely jobless. So instead of having a period where they don't receive salaries or they receive half salaries or whatever it is, then you end up ruining their source of income completely because they completely lose the job when the company collapses. You have to understand that private companies are not like the government that does not collapse. The government is not going to collapse. So if the government even goes completely bankrupt, it's still not going to collapse. That's it. The government is completely way too big to fail when it comes to economics. That's it. Now, it can go completely bankrupt and then adopt austerity measures and all of that, but it's not going to collapse. But companies collapse. So that's it. We have to understand that at a particular point, unions can become counterproductive because when you put so much pressure on that company, it becomes almost completely unable to make profit. It is out of the profit that they do that they pay the salaries of the workers. But when you put so much pressure on the companies now, and then the cost of production becomes so high because after you increase salaries and all of that, and then you make them to keep paying salaries even when there's no productivity, it's going to get to a particular extent where it's just going to become completely unprofitable. It's going to become completely unprofitable, and then they will not even be able to compete with their competitors. Now imagine if there are competitors who are not facing this particular issue, of having to pay salaries to workers who are not working. Those ones are going to be able to produce at lower cost, and they're going to outmaneuver these companies you are talking about. That's what happens. That's exactly what happens, and that's how you're going to drive a company underground. So the best thing to do is that, yeah, it's very, very bad. Blame the economy. Don't blame these companies. The companies are not the ones that brought COVID-19. Blame China and then blame the economy. Blame COVID-19. Don't blame the hotels. Labor, don't blame the hotels. Honestly, you're trying to do good things, but always understand that the way to hell is paved with good intentions. You are going to cause so much more harm to these workers if the company collapses. That's the way it works. I understand that labor always tries to look at things from the perspective of the workers, but they don't look at things from the perspective of the entrepreneur, of the owners of the business, who are always striving every single day of their lives. When they don't have rest, the regular worker is going to go back home during the weekend and be able to sleep. The owners of the companies don't really have a time off for themselves. They have to keep thinking about how the company is going to remain above water, how the company is going to remain productive, how the company is going to be able to go through this financial problem that we are in Nigeria, and then that the economy is not going to completely destroy the company, and the company is going to be able to come out at the end of the day and be productive at the end of this COVID-19. That's what the owners of the companies are going to be thinking about, because that's all they've got. A regular worker can always go out and earn his living, can always go out and apply to another company. This is all the owners of these companies they have. So they put in all the effort into it. So it's completely different from the perspective of the owners of the business and the perspective of the workers. All the workers care about is that, give me my money after I do my job. The owners of the company are going to think about, apart from doing my own job, how do we make sure that this company doesn't collapse? How do we make sure we can pay the salaries of these workers? The workers don't think about that. They don't have to worry about that. So that's the issue. So, and that's how these things all work. So labor should chill a little bit. Hopefully this thing doesn't get out of hands, but the last thing we want to do at this period is for us to put some hotels and to put some businesses completely out of business. We don't want to put them out of business. We don't want to run them down. We want them to be there so that some people will remain at work. Some of the workers will still remain at work instead of losing the entire workforce. So that's exactly what we want. We don't want to do things that are going to be completely counterproductive towards rebuilding the economy, because all economists have been saying now is that we are basically heading for a recession, and it may last the next year, maybe even more than that. So we don't want a situation where we are at a weaker foot while going into that. So anyway, thank you very much. I'll be seeing you in the next video.